Carlos, thank you for your report. I had the opportunity to get an early copy of this and go over it, and I want to say thank you for the work and for the work of the members. I mean, there's a real tangible difference when you have this type of work and you have the safety and security of our state at risk, and these individuals headed up by Judge Carlos Cascos. For those of you who don't know his history in depth, he also served on the Department of Public Safety prior to being elected judge of Cameron County. And thank you for your public service, Carlos, and the members of the council who have devoted so much time to improving the security of our borders. As he ticked off those names, individuals who either share a real knowledge of not just the border, but across this state. And as you absorb the recommendations of this study, you'll find that this is no longer just a border security issue. It's also about the entire state of Texas, and this council has a very important job that continues to impact the security of our state as we talk about the funds that our state has access to that have designated for border security, and making sure that those funds go for the right efforts, that they are properly used. And the bottom line is that we're not only walking the walk, we're talking the talk in Texas when it comes to accountability of these funds. For just about a year, this council's been gathering the appropriate input from local communities. They've been talking to city and county officials, law enforcement. They've been talking to private citizens who have been impacted by these gangs and by criminal activities in places like McAllen, Laredo, Corpus Christi, and El Paso. And in that time, they've become subject matter experts. I mean, the members of this council truly are some of the most knowledgeable people in the state on border security, and they've applied that expertise to a set of recommendations that will further improve the integrity of our border. I'm also very grateful for their efforts. I'm impressed with these findings because border security is a vital issue. It's vitally important to the overall security and economic health of our state. As I shared with Carlos this morning, as I'd looked at an earlier finding, I'm encouraged that they believe in sustained funding for border security operations. And in the next legislature, I'm going to press for that very thing. I'm also pleased that this report chronicles the progress that we've made over the past few years in deterring the threat of crime along our border and then ensuing crime inland. It shows that our strategy has reduced crime along the border. It shows that our strategy has protected our citizens when the federal government did not do their job. It shows that our strategy is working. However, this report shows that our work is far from done. As the cross-border threat adapts to our efforts, our strategy must continue to evolve. You know, when the bad guys realize that their old tricks don't work, they try something new. They stay ahead well, I should say, they try to stay ahead of us, and we try to stay ahead of them. And we've got to have the will, we've got to have the ability, we've got to have the resources to adjust to their changing tactics. As a result of our border security efforts, Mexican drug cartels now rely upon these transnational gangs to smuggle drugs and humans into the United States. In my estimation, the most important threat to our state's security is the rise of these ruthless and powerful transnational gangs. Today, these increasingly sophisticated organizations are expanding their influence across our state. They're spreading like a virus. They're recruiting members in our middle schools and high schools, in our prisons. They are ultra-violent gangs like the Mexican Mafia, the Texas Syndicate, Barrio Azteca, MS-13, and they're terrorizing Texas citizens with their campaign of extortion and kidnapping, murder. At the beginning of this year, there were 23 members of the Texas Mexican Mafia who were indicted in San Antonio for 22 murders, robbery, distribution of heroin and cocaine. In May, there were 14 members of the Texas Syndicate who were convicted in Dallas on 12 counts of murder, including one that ended with the body stuffed in the back of the trunk of a vehicle and set on fire. 15 members of the El Paso-based Barrio Azteca gang has been indicted on charges including extortion, murder, money laundering, assault. Those are just three examples of what more and more law enforcement are having to deal with every day. These transnational gangs are a statewide problem. They got to be stopped. It's not just along the border where we're seeing their impact. As we address this looming problem, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. We need to build on the approaches that we know work, that have a proven track record, that are effective in our successful efforts along the border and been successful in our conspiracy investigations and the prosecutions in our cities. We know that putting more boots on the ground is the best way to drop the hammer on these criminal activities, and that coordinated multi-agency investigations are the only way to dismantle these criminal organizations. When the legislature returns to Austin this next year, I'll not only ask for their investment in continued border security efforts, but we're going to call their attention to this growing gang threat as well. As we've done in our border operations, hurricane recovery, and every statewide effort of note, we should provide state support for local efforts. These efforts would grow out of a shared strategy, an approach that can be broken down into a few key areas of focus. The first area is information sharing and intelligence. We need to know who the leaders of these gangs are, what they're doing, where they're operating. We'll get this knowledge when we establish a multi-agency gang intelligence section that operates 24/7 at the State Fusion Center in Austin. We also need to expand law enforcement's ability to intercept gang communications, to better target their leadership structure. And to improve our intel, we also need to ramp up the resources that are available to law enforcement across the state as they surge into these gang strongholds. As we call on them to pursue these gangs more aggressively, local prosecutors are going to need more resources to pursue the convictions. Local law enforcement will need funding for everything from overtime for their local investigators to conducting of investigations, to buying better equipment than the gangs have. And we have in Operation, as I should say, as we have in Operation Border Star, we need to coordinate these law enforcement resources and activities across jurisdictions and organizations to bring about the greatest possible effect that we can. With the pieces that I've mentioned in place, we'll bring massive pressure on the leadership structure of these gangs, and we'll grind them down. One tip at a time, one piece of information at a time, one conspiracy conviction at a time, one gang at a time. And at the same time we're targeting existing gang members, we also need to shrink their pool of potential recruits by increasing prevention measures like education for parents and for these young people that they're targeting.